Welcome back, RayWeather gang. We're back with more Madden 22 news today. As most of you know, yesterday we covered the trailer and some of the new info that was released, but there were some gaming websites out there that actually dove a little bit deeper into some of the features, and I've been able to play the beta for the last couple days, so I have some first-hand experience that I can add to this and kind of tell you what's going on in the game. I also just finally got my beta codes that I can give away, so my Instagram and Twitter is up on the screen, also below in the pinned comment, so you can go follow me there. Later tonight, I will be giving away the limited codes that I do have, so some of you can play the game early, and each day going forward we're going to be finding out much more about the game, so make sure to subscribe and turn the bell icon on if you don't want to miss any of those videos. Specifically in 3 days on the 21st, they're doing the full deep dive into franchise, and they're going to tell us even more than what we already know, and I know a lot of you guys are interested in hearing about that. So we're going to cover the Game Informer and the IGN article briefly because they have some good things that they mentioned there that I want to touch on, but first there's a few things I want to answer for people. I've seen these questions a lot on Twitter and in my comment section. The first one being the franchise mode pre-order. A lot of people saw that in the pre-order for franchise mode, you can get staff points for your coaching staff, and a lot of people assumed that this meant that franchise mode was going to have microtransactions. Now, EA has said that that's not the case. They're not planning on putting any microtransactions in franchise mode now or never. Basically, they wanted to give franchise guys something in the pre-order because in years past, franchise guys have said, all you do is give pre-order stuff to the MUT guys. You don't ever give us any reason to pre-order. So this year they put that in there, and then it got misconstrued and people thought that now the mode was going to be pay to play. The staff points are how you upgrade the skill tree for your coaches, similar to what you may have saw if you played an NCAA game. They're just giving you some extra ones to start out with, but they're pretty relatively easy to earn in the mode by completing objectives from what I've played. Additionally, if you do play online multi-user CFMs, they said that the commissioner can set this to where each player starts with the same amount of coach points so that people that pre-ordered won't have any upper hand over those that didn't pre-order. So they did cover their bases there. The next thing is the PC version of the game. People wanted to know, would it be next gen version or would it be the old version of the game? Unfortunately, it's still going to be the old version of the game. I don't get this at all. It makes zero sense to me because PCs are more powerful than the next gen consoles. Why should they be playing the inferior version of the game? I don't understand that. They said that they're going to move it to next gen eventually, but it's probably not going to be this year, but they would not give a reason why. I don't understand it. I'm just as dumbfounded as everybody else. And lastly, crossplay. I told you guys a week ago that I heard that crossplay was likely going to be a Madden 23 thing now that got pushed back. Don't know why, don't know the logistics of it, but they have not said anything about crossplay yesterday or today, which leads me to believe that crossplay is not happening, because if it was, I think they would have said something about it yesterday. All right, so let's dive into the article here on Game Informer. The first thing they touch on are the new game day environments and home field advantage. We're going to go a little bit deeper into that. This is the one big new feature that is next gen only, which is something we saw in Madden 21 where they upgraded the environments, the crowds, the sidelines a little bit. This year they're kind of taking that a step further. Everything else pretty much for the game, like franchise stuff and all the other features, are going to be for both generations of console. This is the one thing that's more so just next gen. So the first thing they kind of go into here is talking about the crowd noise, and it says crowd noise can make it tough for opposing quarterbacks to hear the play call, and new characteristics for each team stadium grant special bonuses to the home team and apply various gameplay modifiers based on the location. For example, in the thin air of Denver, throws and kicks will fly further for both teams, while the visiting team will struggle to catch their breath, taking a hit to short-term stamina. Other examples include the windy city of Chicago making it tougher for kicks to fly straight, Vikings players getting a red zone boost as the Skol chant rings through the US Bank Stadium, and the notorious 12th man of Seattle rattles visiting players, making it so that their pre-snap play art is squiggly. This might sound familiar for those who have played the NCAA football series, but according to EA, this goes beyond anything that series did. Of course, if you don't give the fans something to cheer about, they can't be a factor in the game, which is where the game day momentum, another new mechanic, comes into play. Of course, if you don't give the fans something to cheer about, they can't be a factor in the game, which is where the game day momentum, another new mechanic, comes into play. Now, when you play through a game of Madden, a momentum meter appears at the top. Depending on performance of each team, momentum shifts back and forth, granting additional bonuses called M factors to these teams. These can include activating those aforementioned modifiers like making the play call more difficult, or other bonuses like making kickers less accurate or making receivers less effective at running hot routes. While each team can use these M factors, the home team gets a slight advantage with one additional M factor to hammer home the notion of home field advantage. Now, this is something I'm finally glad to see them represent in the game, specifically how each environment's unique. The Denver one is a great example. We always see in real life, you see longer field goals in Denver because the air is thin, but you also see opposing teams struggle, and that's why Denver has one of the better home field advantages, because other teams are not used to practicing and playing multiple times a year in that altitude, so they typically do have a tougher time with their stamina, and I like that that's being represented in the game. So another example is I was playing with my Saints, and of course the Superdome is known for crowd noise and being loud, and I was up a bunch of points. The momentum was completely in my favor, and what happens is not only do you get squiggly lines, right, if you're the away team, but sometimes you'll get a false start penalty because of the crowd noise. Your wide receiver might not run the hot route that you told him to run. You might try to audible and it doesn't happen because the communication is messed up because of the crowd noise. Again, that's things that we see happen in real life. But sometimes they get even more specific. Like in the Saints Stadium, for example, there was a specific M factor where the opposing QB would miss his check down reads more often if the crowd noise was so loud, because typically if you're rattled and you're on the road, you can have a tendency to maybe get tunnel vision and just lock in on your main read, and you might miss your check down. So I thought it was interesting that it actually got that specific, because those are things that you can see happen in real life, and I like that that's represented in the game. Now, the area that I think they could take this a step further is making it player-based as well. For example, I think Tom Brady should perform better in a hostile away environment than a rookie QB, 1,000,000%, but it doesn't appear that that is the case. Now, this is something that maybe they will choose to do with abilities. We don't know yet because they haven't talked about those yet, but that to me would be a good idea. A guy like Brady or those veteran QBs that have been there, done that, maybe they have an ability where they get less rattled on the road, or where crowd noise doesn't affect them, because we've seen them be that way in real life. I think that's how you take this a step further and make it even more authentic. Now, additionally, to go along with all the crowd and stadium stuff, there was a piece in the IGN article that I found interesting when they talked about superfans, because EA said that each stadium would have their own superfan, and somebody from IGN asked them, would these be the real life Supermans? For example, like Fireman Ed, who is the Jet superfan. I believe most stadiums have their own superfan, which is basically like a stadium celebrity. He goes to every game, he might dress up a certain way, and everybody knows who he is. EA said that the superfans in the game were going to be made up superfans, and that they could not track down all of these real life superfans because the cost of tracking them down and getting their likeness would be just too high. And a lot of people that saw this already thought this was pretty hilarious, and I agree. I do not like this answer at all. I would have much rather them just say, no, we just decided to go with created superfans. But the fact that they said it would cost too much is just not something you can say when you're EA Sports, when people know how much money you make. On top of that, you've had the Migos in the game, you've had Snoop Dogg in the game, you've had DJ Khaled in the game, you've put Madden players as coaches in Ultimate Team, and I'm fine with all of that. I'm fine with putting celebrities in Superstar KO. It makes sense to put those kind of things there. I'm fine with you putting Madden players in MUT as coaches, but you can't do that and then say it would cost too much to get 32 superfans in the game, because number one, I guarantee you getting guys like the Migos in the game is going to cost way more money than licensing a superfan. I would also argue that most of those superfans would probably do it for free, just because the cool factor of being represented in a game to a lot of people would be enough. But even if you had to pay them, this is something we're talking about that likely is a few $1,000s. It's not something that's that expensive compared to the money that EA brings in. And I could be wrong, but I would imagine most of these super fans would be very, very inexpensive. Some of them probably even free to put in the game, so I just don't like this answer. Jumping back to the Game Informer article, now we're going to talk more about franchise mode. It says here, the new franchise staff feature lets you build, grow, and customize 4 coaching staff positions using RPG-style skill trees. Using experience earned through play, you can develop your head coach, player personnel, offensive coordinator, and defensive coordinator with more than 60 different talents. Additionally, players can expect more talents to arrive following launch. For Madden 22's franchise, EA wanted to make every week feel like a distinct struggle. Sure, it accomplishes that through the new crowd and stadium atmosphere mechanics, as well as the specialized team-based momentum modifiers, but each team behaves different, and the gameplay should reflect that down to the core experience. Now, before each game and franchise, you can set your strategy heading in. Using a new interface, you can study your opponent's strengths, weaknesses, and tendencies, then shape your game plan around that. For example, if you're playing against the Ravens, you might want to try and contain the hybrid quarterback, while facing off against the Bills and a pass-heavy attack might require a different strategy. Then if you get into the game and you see new tendencies are emerging, or that certain strategies are more or less effective than you thought, you can now adjust them in your game plan at halftime. It's no secret that the game of football is a grueling sport that can grind down the human body week after week, so Madden 22 is including a new way to monitor player health. Now when you set up practices for the week, you can manage each player's practice intensity and if they're donning full pads the whole week, in a careful balancing act of getting them the fullest benefits while also making sure they're healthy to suit up on Sunday. The decisions don't stop there, however, as now you have more engaging goals to complete alongside choices to make and challenges with better rewards. New storylines emerge complete with cinematics, choices to make, and more goals specific to the team you're controlling. Through these sequences, you can earn staff points, player experience, and even dev traits. And on top of all of this, they're going to be doing an update in September that overhauls the scouting with the ability to manage and assign national and regional scouts with players that gain and lose value on your draft board throughout the course of the season. So let's talk about franchise. I can give a little bit more first-hand impressions because I did play it for a few hours yesterday. First off, I think for the first year that they finally did recommit, I personally think they did a lot in the 9 months of time to develop this. They missed an entire generation. They missed an entire decade. They neglected the mode. But I see that as like, we've blamed them for that, but it's in the past and we're just never getting those years back. I think from these last 9 months of development time, they've put a lot in the franchise mode for 22 versus what was in it for last year. It's an entirely different mode in my opinion from playing it. The coaching and staff management stuff, I think for the first year is pretty decent. I'm glad it's not just names on the screen that don't matter. You know, you can hire, you can fire, you can promote. You have skill trees for each coach where you can apply your staff points, which you earn by completing objectives, and then you apply that to your coaches. I think the old version of this was kind of the XP system, but they've integrated it into the skill trees. I think that they can grow this out in the future and do coaching carousel and make it even better. I would hope that that's the plans for it. But for year one, I think this is a good start for the coaching and staff management, and they're going to add more skills with the post-launch update so that you can grow the coaches out even more. The gameplay stuff is pretty in-depth from what I experienced. They give you all of this game planning stuff, and a lot of it's based, I think, off real-life stats that they're putting in the game, and they're going to update those throughout the year. But basically, you're playing a team, and you can see what do they like to do in first and long, what are they doing second and long, second and short, third and long, and so on. What concepts do they like to run the most? What percentage do they run these concepts, both running and passing the ball? Who are their star players? Who are the players that they get involved the most? And you have a bunch of options of how you want to attack this on offense and on defense. And whichever ones you pick are going to give a boost to your team. So if you're playing the Chiefs, you might say, we want to focus on stopping the deep pass, Tyreek Hill, take him out of the game. You're going to get a boost in your secondary to zone and man coverage for that game and maybe play recognition and stuff like that. Now, if you get into the game, however, and they kind of switched it up on you, let's say they're just running the ball more than expected, at halftime, you can change those adjustments and say, you know what, now we want to focus more on the run. Or now they're blitzing us more than we expected, so we need to kind of focus on short passing, getting the ball out quick, and those are going to apply different boosts for the second half of the game to your players. I think that that's a good step for the mode. I think that's the depth that people want, and sure, it can still grow much further from that, but again, for the first iteration of this like revamped, I think that's pretty good. The player health stuff is pretty good as well. You can decide how you want to split the reps in practice between starters and backups. If you want them to go full pads or half pads, if you work them harder in full pads and, you know, give them more reps, they can earn more XP, but they have a much higher chance of getting injured. Whereas if you balance it, you're going to get limited XP, but you're not going to get injured as often. So those are things that I know people have said they wanted and they want to manage. I think those are good additions to the mode. Now, the scenario engine is a thing I was the most impressed by just because the original scenario engine was so crap and awful, and I've said it a million times on this channel. You know, I was blown away with the changes they made to that just because it was such a drastic difference. And they actually brought in a member of the community to help them with this because they know that they have a disconnect with us clearly. So they brought in somebody to help work on this. They created 35 new scenarios that are complete with cinematics and cutscenes, and they're going to add more supposedly post-launch, which is great. I hope they live up to that. But these were so much better than the original scenario engine. Like, there would be multiple of them each week that you could play through, and they actually affected your team, which I thought was great. And, you know, some would be press conferences where you'd talk to the press, you'd have interviews. Sometimes you'd be in the GM's office. Sometimes you'd be in your office talking to your QB or a locker room talking to another player. One specific one that stood out to me, like, this is small, but I thought this is the things that I think people want to see in the mode because they matter. I had a veteran player come to me in the locker room. He's an offensive lineman, one of my higher rated players. And he was like, you know, I'm ready to retire. My heart's not in it no more. I'm ready to hang it up. And I convinced him to stay. I'm like, look, can you just hang in there for this last year? We really need you. And he was basically like, you know, I can try to hang in there, but if we don't start winning games, like, it's just not going to work for me because I'm ready to hang it up. And like, if we're not going after a championship, you know, there's really no reason for me to be here. I'm just wasting my time when I'm ready to move on. Because at the time we were like 2 and 3, we were very mediocre. And then immediately after that, it gave me like the prompt on screen and it said, you know, all of his overall, like his ratings went down, and it said his heart and his head's not in it anymore. So it took his ratings down, which I thought was great because in real life we see this when players aren't happy in their situation and they want to retire or they want to get traded. They don't usually perform as well because their heart's not in it. They're not locked in. They're not playing their full potential because they don't want to be there. And that was something I had no control over, and it affected my team. It affected my whole offensive line. And that's what I thought we were going to get with the scenario engine 2 years ago when it was introduced, were things like that were out of my control that I would now have to work around. Oh, this player wants to be traded because he's not getting the ball enough. And we just didn't really see that happen. There was another scenario where the GM came to me. He said, look, we've got a little bit of money to spend. You know, our record's kind of mediocre. I think we could benefit by adding another player to the team that can hopefully make an impact for us. What do you think? Should we focus offense or defense? Where do you think we could use, you know, the bigger impact? And I said defense. And what I was impressed by here is it brought me a cornerback and a safety. And those were the 2 positions on defense that I actually needed more help. Now, I don't know if that was a fluke because this is my thing. The scenario engine is cool, but it has to make sense. In this scenario, it made sense. It actually brought me 2 positions that I actually did need to get better at. It didn't give me a position that I already had good players at. Now, I ultimately decided not to go with them because I just wasn't interested in those players. And then we went to the offensive side of the ball and he gave me 2 options there, and kind of same thing. There were players that we could use, but I wasn't really happy with the names that he brought me that were available. So I just said, you know, we'll look at it in a couple weeks. Let's just kind of see how things go, and we'll kind of revisit this and see if we need to bring somebody in. And again, those are things that I want to see with the scenario engine. And there's 35 different things like that. So I don't think it's one of those things that now is going to get, you know, boring really quickly. Whereas the previous scenario engine, like 90% of it was essentially, hey, we're going against this good player this week. Should we focus on him or not focus on him? That was like 90% of the scenario engine before. So I'm happy to see it actually become much better now. Now, the one place I'm seeing people kind of get aggravated is that, oh, we got to wait a couple extra weeks to get the scouting overhaul. I'm going to be honest, I don't really see that as an issue because I'm just going over all these other new things that are there for franchise. I'm not mad if I got to wait a couple extra weeks for scouting. It's not like they're saying, yeah, this is going to come in November. If this was the only thing they were adding to franchise mode, then yeah, but they redid assistant coaches, added skill trees, redid game planning, added halftime adjustments, added the environments and home field advantage, added the player health monitoring, redid the scenario engine and made it much better. They did all of these things. They redid the Super Bowl halftime show, which, I mean, I'm not patting them on the back for it, but it's another change that's there. I think they're going to even bring in new relocation teams. Just not sure if that's going to be directly at launch or a little bit later as well, because they haven't confirmed it. But they've done all of these things for franchise. I'm not going to complain if it's going to take them a couple extra weeks to redo the scouting, because from what I've heard and seen, it's going to be national and regional scouts, and it's going to be much more than the crappy system we already have where you just hit 3 buttons on a player and you find out everything about him. If you're going to give us all of this stuff and redo the scouting, I just don't see the point in like planting your flag on being mad that the scouting is going to take an additional couple weeks, because it looks like they've added a ton to the mode, and from the little that I've played, I've noticed quite the difference than any franchise mode of the last 10 years. So that's just kind of my thoughts on it. Let me know your thoughts below. I mean, they neglected the mode for so long, which I've blamed them for, but if they're going to finally rebuild it, we have to actually allow them to rebuild it now. They can't just rebuild it in 3 months. This is something they're years behind on, and I think for this first year, they're definitely delivering quite a bit for that first year of actually committing to it. That's really all I wanted to cover today. We're going to find out more information in the days and weeks to come, but those are kind of 2 areas that I wanted to dive a little bit deeper with you guys and talk about. I'll make a video soon, probably this weekend, going more in depth about my experience with the gameplay of the beta, but I want to sit with that a little bit longer before I talk about it. So make sure you subscribe, bell icon on so you don't miss that. I'll see you guys next time.